Hi, Doug Andrew here. In this episode, we are going to discuss the difference between term insurance, whole life insurance, and universal life insurance, why universal life was originally designed by E.F. Hutton, who was the brainchild behind the emergence of universal life back in 1980. You'll be able to answer questions for your own benefit, but also for your clients, on how to structure universal life the way it was originally intended for living benefits. And then I'm going to teach you about the 5 parties associated with an insurance contract, because it's extremely important to understand this. And you wouldn't believe how many insurance agents are never taught the details that are sort of elementary, basic about insurance. And you're going to understand what COI is at the end of this episode. So let's get going on understanding the difference between term insurance, whole life insurance, and universal life. I'm going to go here to the whiteboard and help you understand just the basics. And if you think you've got it down, I want you to watch, because you're going to need to explain this to some clients, I assure you. And that's why I want you to sort of see how I do this if I'm explaining it to like an engineer thinking type of a client. So here we go, over here to the whiteboard. I'm just going to create a graph, and we will say that on this bottom line right here are the number of years, and this over here is the COI. Now, COI is the cost of insurance, okay? And down here would be the age. Now, this is going to be super simple here. In fact, let's just say instead of age 0, because mortality tables, this is the Commissioner's Standard Ordinary Table. It's called the CSO table. They, of course, start with a newborn. But for the sake of this video, let's just say we're going to start at age 30 down here, okay? And at age 30, we're going to start here, and we are going to follow this 30-year-old out to age 100 or age 120 is what most of them, because the fastest growing segment of American society today are those people reaching over the age of 100. Did you know that? So we're going to go out here to, well, let's just say age 100. Now, when you buy term insurance, whole life insurance, universal life, it all has a term insurance cost component in it. It all has term insurance in it. When you're buying pure term insurance, you're simply paying for the cost of insurance. Now, back when I started, now, I'm pretty old. My first pet was a dinosaur. I have an Apple Watch now, but my first watch was a sundial, okay? I have an autographed copy of the Bible. Now, when I say this to young people, I remember when Burger King was just a prince and Baskin Robbins only had one flavor of ice cream. That's how old I am. Now, when we talk about way back when I started in 1974, probably before most of you were born, we had at that time the Commissioner's Standard Ordinary Mortality Table, and that's the one that all the legal reserve insurance companies had to go by. It was the 1958. Now, there was, I think, a 1941 before that. So about every 15 to 20 years, the government comes out with the Commissioner's Standard Ordinary Mortality Table, and this measures the number of deaths per thousand for age 30, let's say, for all 30-year-olds in America. And they divide it up between male and female gender. Now they're combining them together. And so let's say we go 30 and we come out here to age, let's say this is age 65. And so this might be right around age 40 and age 50, age 55. And then we have, here's maybe age 75 and 85 and age 90 and then age 100. So what's going to happen is there's going to be more deaths per thousand every year people get older. I mean, this is pretty logical, right? And so let's just super simplify this. Back in the 1958 mortality table when I started, the mortality for 30-year-olds was 2.13 deaths per thousand. Then after that, in 1980, they revised it. Then they revised it again in 2001. Then they revised it again in 2015, 16, 17. And so they're constantly updating it because people are living longer. And so they don't want insurance companies charging more than the actual pure cost of insurance, but this is what actuaries use. So let's just round it to $2. When I started, it was around 2 deaths per 1,000 30-year-olds. Okay, let's just think simply here. Let's say we had a fraternity and we all got together every year in this fraternal organization. And somebody comes up with an idea, hey, you know, last year when we met, Jim and Joe were here and they both passed away. Let's take a moment of silence for them. But let's pass a hat around the room. And let's come up with $1,000 for each of these 2 surviving spouses, these widows, let's say. And so how much would everybody have to put in the hat for these 2 widows to have $1,000? Well, if there's 1,000 people in the room, everybody has to contribute $2. That is the pure COI, cost of insurance. Everybody contributes $2 in the hat, and you have 2,000, and now you have 1,000 for each of the 2 winners. I mean, the ones who passed away, right? And so that is the pure mortality cost. Now, the next year we get together, there might be 3 deaths per 1,000, so everybody has to contribute $3, and then $4, and then $5. And so as you get going here, you're having to chip in more and more money, and the people who are contributing it are fewer and fewer. Does that make sense? And so that's called the pure cost of insurance. And so annual renewable term goes up every year as you get older because more people, as they get older, are dying per 1,000 out of the ones. In fact, it used to be in America in the first half of the 1900s, about 1/3 of males were dead by age 65. So only 2/3 made it to here. So it's based upon this mortality chart. So that's annual renewable term. Now, there's other kinds of term insurance. You studied for the insurance exam, and so you can pay a 10-year level term or whatever. But let me shift into whole life. Whole life insurance came out where people said, you know what, this gets pretty expensive down the road. So let's have people pay a higher premium the early years, and have them overpay the early years and underpay the latter years with a level premium for their whole life. And so this is where whole life insurance came out and said, why don't we just pay this premium for our whole life? Now, what you're doing, let me put this in green because you're overpaying, way overpaying at age 30 for the actual cost of insurance. And this overpayment of money is building up what is called cash value that is going to cover this underpayment after about age 65. And so now you're underpaying because you're still paying this level premium your whole life to age 100. And so you're overpaying the early years, underpaying the latter years, and that level premium just keeps it the same premium your whole life. That's why it's called whole life. Now, there's a certain amount you have to pay to be able to have the guarantees. If you get off track, you lose those guarantees and so forth. Whole life was designed for death benefit, and it's designed to give you a level premium, but it has some very strict, rigid rules or tracks you have to go on. If you go off those tracks, you lose those guarantees, and you may have to pay higher premiums or put money back in and so forth. I won't go into the details of this, but that's where whole life was born. So let's fast forward. What happened is that sometimes people said, well, why don't we pay a higher premium to age 65, and now we have more excess. We way overpay, and after people retired, let's say at age 65, they can hopefully stop. So this was like paid up at age 65. If you paid more money in, there was more equity in the policy, more cash value, and you could stop paying after age 65, and it would cover you your whole life based upon the mortality. So watch this. They said, well, golly, if we can do that at 65, why don't we pay this much for 20 years to age 50 and stop? Well, why don't we pay, let's take this chart up here. Why don't we pay for 10 years? Let's have a 10 pay. Let's pay this much for 10 years and stop. You're having to pay more money in a compressed time frame for a policy that's 10 pay. And there was actually single premium. Well, how much could I pay to have $1 million of life insurance with one fell swoop? Well, when you're 30, you may only have to pay 125 grand or 150,000 because the insurance company, the mortality table is simply going, well, if you put in 125,000 based upon the rate of return the insurance company is getting on your money, if they're earning 5% or 7%, they know that that will double every 10 years. 125,000 will double to 250, double to 500, and another 10 years will double to $1 million. And if you die 30 years from now, they will have the wherewithal because they know the average person will live this long based upon these mortality tables. So that was a single premium whole life. Okay, so you'd pay one premium and it would cover you for your whole life. Then universal life was born. Now, this is what a lot of insurance agents don't understand. Universal life was originally designed not by an insurance company. It was the brainchild of E.F. Hutton. They were a brokerage firm. And they said, wait a minute. One of the neat benefits you'll learn in this educational series is that money inside of an insurance policy, all this excess money accumulates tax-free because this is like a sacred cow. And you're going to learn in another episode why it's tax-free, because this accumulates tax-free to help widows and orphans not have to be reliant and dependent on the government and so forth. So it has tax advantages. And all E.F. Hutton said is, hello, we can access money out of here also for retirement, and it's tax-free. It's the only vehicle that allows you to accumulate money tax-free and be able to access it tax-free. And if you die, it blossoms, it increases in value and transfers income tax-free. Nothing else like that in the entire Internal Revenue Code does that. Municipal bonds don't do that. You accumulate money tax-free, you can access it tax-free, and when you die, it blossoms and transfers income tax-free. The real difference is, E.F. Hutton said, instead of worrying about just the death benefit, let's use it for living benefits. Hello, it's called life insurance, not death insurance. Now, I saw this. It happened in 1980, and I knew exactly that this is buy term, invest the difference, couched under a tax-free umbrella. It's buy term, invest the difference on steroids, okay? And so E.F. Hutton just said, why don't we, instead of trying to get the most insurance for the least premium, let's take the least amount of insurance we can get away with and put in the most premium. Let's put in this much. Let's put in a whole bunch of money, maybe up here, and let's throw $500,000 into it. And I don't care what the death benefit is. We're just self-insuring. Put in $500,000, you're self-insuring, there's a $500,000 death benefit. So you're self-insuring, but it's tax-free because it's insurance. Now I'm going to teach you in the further episode why this is so magical and what had to happen to comply. But when you put in a whole bunch of money and you take the least amount of insurance the IRS will let you get away with and put in the most money as fast as the IRS allows, this thing turns into a sacred tax-free cash cow. And so this is the emergence of universal life. It was originally designed for the living cash value tax-free accumulation and access to be able to accumulate $1 million of cash value tax-free and then have $1 million generate $70,000 a year, $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 a year of tax-free income for your retirement. It's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. This will knock the socks off of any IRA or 401k you could show me. And so you're going to see how a properly structured, max-funded, indexed universal life insurance policy will outperform most IRAs, 401ks that I've ever seen, in fact, and why it is the dream solution for retirement, but other goals, real estate management, capital management within a business, college funding, and on and on and on. That's when universal life came out. So this is extremely important to understand. You're taking the least amount of insurance the IRS will let you get away with and put in the most money as fast as the IRS allows. Get ready. You're going to learn what those parameters are, those tax citations. And when you understand that and help your clients understand it, you will be able to structure these correctly so that people can earn rates of return like I have of 11% and net 10% cash on cash net internal rate of return. Most insurance agents in the industry have not seen that. But before we end, I want you to understand in this episode the 5 parties associated with an insurance contract. This is very important to understand. So the 5 parties to an insurance contract or an insurance policy are the insurer, insured, the owner, the premium payor, and the beneficiary. Let me explain briefly the relationship of all of these to the insurance contract. So the insurer is the insurance company. Now, we want to use a strong insurance company that has high ratings. We'll talk about that in other episodes. And we want to use a legal reserve insurance company, basically because the insurance industry is a $1 trillion industry. And it is the backbone of America, the backbone of the world. It is why during the Great Depression, when some real estate dropped 80%, banks closed their doors, 40% never opened their doors again. Guess how many legal reserve insurance companies went under in the Great Depression? 0, okay? How about 2008? In 2008, over 400 banks went under. 900 more were on the watch list. The federal government asked the 5 major banks in America to disclose where they had their Tier 1 assets for liquidity and safety. Guess where it was? Bank-owned life insurance. Hello, I will explain that in future episodes. And so there wasn't one legal reserve insurance company that went under in 2008. If they become insolvent because of a run on the bank or something, all of the insurance companies have to ante up. They cross-insure each other. It's not like some FDIC, Federally Deposit Insurance Corporation, where the government charges premiums to banks. And frankly, they've been broke, but see, the government has the ability to print money and tax us. So people feel safe with their money in a bank. In my opinion, money inside of the legal reserve insurance system is the safest place I could have my money. It's the last domino to fall if the entire monetary system collapsed in this country. And if it got that bad, you'd be growing carrots in your backyard. It wouldn't matter if you had your money because the money would be worthless. Does that make sense? And so this is why I'm passionate about having my money in a strong position. So the insurer is the insurance company. The insured is the one where the insurance death benefit, the person that is on, okay? You cannot have a corporation be the insured. It has to be an individual. So that is the person that the life insurance death benefit is on. You must prove that there would be an economic loss suffered by somebody by virtue of the insured's death. Now, that person is the beneficiary. I'll talk about in a second. Now, generally speaking, the insured is also the owner, but they don't have to be. Generally speaking, the premium payor is the insured. It does not have to be. So let me give you an example here. If I was the insured and I had my trust own the insurance policy, or I own insurance policies on my kids, I own them on my wife, I own them on my parents, and I'll explain that in another episode. But I can own insurance policies. The owner of the insurance policy gets all the tax-free living benefits, all the cash value that accumulates in there. So in this chart, all this money, if you're going to use it for tax-free income and the interest on this, that means the owner gets all of this. They don't have to be the insured. They generally are. But many times people are uninsurable, so they own it on their spouse or on their kids. So the owner is generally the insured, but doesn't have to be. The premium payor could be a grandparent. It could be somebody out there who just wants to put the money in there. They don't have to be the owner. Generally speaking, the insured and the owner and the premium payor are the same person. But many, many times they can't be, or it's not the best situation to have that happen. Most of the time when we have somebody who is uninsurable, they will still own a max-funded indexed universal life insurance policy on a surrogate, on their spouse, their kids, their grandkids, okay? So we have the insurer, the insured, the owner, the premium payor. Oh, what's the last one? The beneficiary. Now, the beneficiary is who is named to get the proceeds when the insured dies. And when you take out an insurance policy, you probably understand you must prove to the underwriter that there will be an economic loss suffered by virtue of the insured's death by this beneficiary. You can change the beneficiary after the policy is issued, but you can't just go apply for $1 bazillion of life insurance. You have to qualify based upon your income or your net worth. And when you're younger, in your 30s, and I have, Sherry, my wife, and I, we had 6 children. So I could qualify for up to 30 times my income. If I made $100,000 a year when I was 30 years old, I could qualify for $3 million. Later in life, when the years left that you have are fewer, and at that time, I don't have dependents anymore, I can only qualify for maybe 6 or 8 times my income at age 65. But then I can qualify for maybe 1 times my net worth. If I'm worth $5 million, I can qualify for $5 million of life insurance, okay? And so there's a lot of reason and justification parameters that you must abide by depending upon the insurance company and the underwriter. But the beneficiary, at the time the policy is issued, must justify the death benefit. They must prove that they would suffer economically that much money by virtue of that insured's death. So once you understand the relationship, as we continue in this educational series, you're going to then be able to understand how these relationships can change based upon who is wanting the living benefit. Well, the owner can own insurance on their spouse or their kids, or what we call a surrogate. Now, in summary, I want you to understand that term insurance is a pure cost. Term insurance is inherent in whole life and universal life. In other words, the pure cost of insurance. Whole life was designed to pay premiums primarily for death benefit. Can whole life be used for living benefits? Yeah, but I can make a universal life max funded far outperform a whole life insurance policy, even with the same insurance company, when you design it correctly. And I can have guarantees. I can basically, on $1 million of cash value with universal life, because I can squeeze down the death benefit tighter, I can generate 8 to 10% payouts, 80 to 100,000 a year of tax-free income if you live to be 120. You'd be very hard pressed to do that with whole life. You'd be lucky to get maybe 40,000 or 50,000 a year of income that would last until your age 120 out of a whole life policy. If you die and you do it basically for the death benefit, whole life's not bad to be able to use for death benefit. And if you want to know absolutely guaranteed that that policy will be in force when you die, whole life may be the better way to go. But if you want to have the death benefit, and you want to have living benefits, that's where my clients were interested, and universal life, hands down, was the best. It's called universal life because it's universally applicable to whatever goal, and you can switch. So in this spectrum, where you maybe want to pay the least amount of premium and have the greatest death benefit possible, you could get by with paying less premium into a universal life to be covered than in a whole life policy. And especially back in 1980 when it started. So you could pay less premium for the same amount of insurance. But E.F. Hutton came out with it, designed to pay the most. At the time, it was usually one lump sum I just want to throw a $500,000 in there and then take tax-free income of $50,000 a year the rest of my life. And you're going to learn a lot of my clients did that in 1980. They threw in $500,000 and they started pulling out $50,000 a year of tax-free income, 10% payout, and they've been doing it ever since. You can't do that in a whole life policy. So universal life can be designed on one end of the spectrum for living benefits, the other end of the spectrum for death benefit, or anywhere in between. That's why it was called universal life, because it's universally applicable.